One bed. How the hell did it come to this? Stranded God knows where, the humid, late summer air thick enough to taste, staring at the single, sagging mattress in this roadside motel room that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and regret. And next to me, my stepson, Liam, 22 years old, my husband David's son. The air crackled with more than just the faulty wiring. Life throws unpredictable punches, doesn't it? But this felt like a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from. Months of David being away in another city, the phone calls growing shorter, the excuses lamer, the distance wasn't just miles, it was a chasm opening up in my life, leaving me feeling adrift. Alone at 47, and somehow asking Liam, all restless energy and that infuriatingly charming smirk so like his father's, to drive me hours away to surprise David at his conference. Somehow that had morphed into this. A broken-down car, a one-bed motel room, and a tension so thick it vibrated. What happens when loneliness and opportunity collide in a place like this? When the lines blur beyond recognition? Before we unpack how this night unraveled, do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, the twists in this story are just getting started and you won't want to miss what happens next. Your likes and comments also fuel everything here, thank you. Okay, let's rewind to that morning. That morning, glancing in the mirror before leaving, I'd felt a pang. The reflection wasn't bad objectively. Still attractive, still put together, even if David's neglect felt like a constant, dull ache beneath the surface. But the spark? It was fading. The expensive serums couldn't counteract the slow erosion of feeling unwanted. Liam was in the kitchen, wolfing down cereal. Hey, I called out, forcing a brightness I didn't feel. Road trip. You need the driving practice before college starts, right? Take me to your dad's hotel. He looked up, that familiar mischievous grin playing on his lips. He had David's looks, but with a youthful fire that was entirely his own. Sure thing, Claire Bear, he teased, using the nickname I pretended to hate. On one condition. Dad finally lets me borrow the sedan next weekend. We'll discuss it with him, I replied, maybe a little too sharply, ushering him toward the garage. Inside, I was just thinking, let's get this over with. See David. Try to bridge the gap. I had no idea the journey itself would become the destination in the worst possible way. We'd been driving for nearly 2 hours. Windows down against the sticky heat, Liam singing off-key to some obnoxious radio hit, me trying to lose myself in my phone, ignoring the slightly too long glances he occasionally shot my way in the rearview mirror. Then came the noise, a sickening lurch, a metallic screech, followed by an ominous, final silence as the engine died. What was that? I asked, trying desperately to keep the panic out of my voice. Liam cursed, wrestling the car onto the dusty shoulder. Damn it. I think we're done. And we were. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, the sun beating down relentlessly. Cell signal barely existed. We spent 2 agonizing hours arguing, calling numbers that barely connected, trying futilely to diagnose the problem. Finally, defeated, we had to face it. The only sign of civilization for miles was that flickering motel sign we'd passed earlier. At the motel reception, as Liam dealt with the bored-looking clerk, I stood behind him, vibrating with frustration and a strange, unfamiliar dread. If David finds out about this, he'll flip. But curiously, in that moment, the thought of David's anger didn't hit as hard as it should have. Deep down, a tiny, treacherous voice whispered that tonight was going to change things. Permanently. When Liam came back holding a single, flimsy keycard, my stomach plummeted. It's all they had left, he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. Opening the door to room 107 felt like stepping into a sad, forgotten corner of the world. Small wasn't the word. It was cramped. One queen-sized bed with a questionable floral spread dominated the space. A rickety nightstand, a buzzing overhead light casting dismal shadows. The air conditioner wheezed ineffectively. This is it. I breathed, the disappointment sour in my mouth. Liam stepped in behind me, chuckling nervously. What were you expecting, Claire? The Four Seasons? It's just for one night. Relax. His attempt at nonchalance, that cheeky grin, it should have just irritated me more. But tangled up with the annoyance was something else. A thrill? Being trapped here, with him, his easy confidence, his youth, it stirred something restless inside me, something I didn't dare examine too closely. God, this heat is unbearable, I murmured, pressing a hand to the back of my neck. I think I need a shower or I'm actually going to pass out. Yeah, sure. Liam responded quickly. Maybe too quickly. Tossing his duffel bag onto the bed and sprawling on his back, staring at the ceiling. Place is all yours, Claire. Do what you gotta do. I glanced at him for a second, his lean frame, the way his shirt clung slightly in the humidity, the boyishness still evident despite his age. There was an undeniable attractiveness there, raw and unpolished. I forcefully pushed the thought away. He's David's son. Your stepson. I escaped into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. For a long moment, I just stared at my reflection in the cheap, spotted mirror. My hair was damp and clinging to my skin. I still looked okay. That spark, maybe dulled, wasn't entirely extinguished. Turning the shower on, I stepped under the lukewarm spray, hoping the water could wash away the tangle of emotions tightening in my chest. I'm 47 years old, I thought fiercely. And Liam, he's not a kid anymore. He's 22. And here we were, trapped together in this claustrophobic room. The idea was both deeply unsettling and disturbingly exciting. David. His face flashed in my mind. I wanted to surprise you, to connect. And now I'm here, with your son. And I don't know how to feel about any of this. The steam filled the tiny bathroom, soothing my tired body even as my mind raced. Liam's easy grin, his casual confidence. It was lighting fuses I didn't even know I had. What would happen when that spark caught? Later, needing space, needing air, I decided to head downstairs for dinner alone, hoping to clear my head. I slipped on a simple, flowing sundress, practical for the heat, but maybe, subconsciously, an attempt to feel a little more put together, a little less frayed. The hotel restaurant was small, mostly empty, fitting for the setting. I ordered a light salad and a glass of white wine, hoping it would help me relax. The sun had set and the lonely parking lot lights outside cast long shadows. Sitting there, picking at my food, my thoughts kept drifting back upstairs, back to that room. Back to Liam. What was he doing up there right now? Someone with his restless energy surely wasn't enjoying being cooped up. Yet that casual attitude of his, so effortless, it was driving me crazy in ways I couldn't define. When the wine was gone, I pushed my plate away and made my way back upstairs, taking slow, deliberate steps, almost dreading what waited behind that door. Approaching the room, I noticed how quiet it was. I eased the door open, and the image that greeted me made my breath catch in my throat. Liam had showered. He was fast asleep on the bed, lying on his back, wearing only one of the motel's thin white robes, tied loosely at the waist. It had fallen partially open as he slept, revealing a startling expanse of smooth, leanly muscled chest, the hard line of his hip, the long, athletic shape of his thigh. His dark hair, still damp, curled boyishly over his forehead, and there was a faint, peaceful smile on his lips, as if lost in a pleasant dream. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was the last thing I expected to walk into. For a paralyzing second, I hesitated by the door, unsure what to do. A chaotic mix of feelings warred inside me, profound discomfort warring with an undeniable magnetic pull. I felt like an intruder, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. Claire. My inner voice screamed. What the hell are you doing? That's David's son. Turn around. But my eyes betrayed me, drawn back to the vulnerable side of him, to the way the robe had shifted even more, revealing just a bit more skin. A slow, unwelcome heat began to build deep inside me. The suffocating smallness of the room made the situation impossible. There was no other bed, no couch. It was either sleep inches away from him, or spend the rest of the humid night crammed into that single, uncomfortable-looking wooden chair. The thought of the chair in this heat seemed unbearable. Taking a deep, silent breath, I moved further into the room, carefully closing the door behind me. Liam's steady, even breathing filled the small space. I tried to focus, to calm the pandemonium inside, but clear thought felt impossible. Get it together, Claire, I muttered silently. It's just one night. It doesn't mean anything. Be sensible. I took a few hesitant steps closer to the bed, my gaze fixed on Liam's sleeping form. That innocent smile on his face only made my already tangled thoughts more difficult to unravel. Finally, resigned, I sat down gingerly on the very edge of the mattress, my back pointedly towards him, wondering how on earth I was going to survive the night. Sometime in the dead of night, a faint sound woke me. I barely opened my eyes, just enough to scan the dim room. I saw Liam shifting on the bed beside me. He seemed half asleep, running a hand through his already messy hair, stretching slightly. I found myself watching him through slitted eyelids, pretending to still be asleep, heart pounding quietly. Then I felt it. His movement stilled. His eyes were on me. My heart rate kicked into overdrive. He was awake, and he was watching me. I forced myself to maintain the act, keeping my breathing slow and even, staying perfectly still, but inside every nerve ending was buzzing. Slowly, deliberately, I watched as he reached down and untied the belt of his robe. As it loosened, the fabric fell away from his shoulders, revealing more of his toned, youthful physique. The way his muscles shifted subtly with the movement sent a jolt, a hot, cool feeling, rushing through me. I couldn't stop watching. In that instant, I recognized two terrifying things. I had absolutely no control over what was happening, and a dangerous part of me didn't even want to stop it. He swung his legs out of bed and rummaged in his bag, pulling out a pair of shorts. As he did, he kept glancing back at me as if trying to gauge whether I was truly asleep. His glances fueled the strange eagerness building inside me. I tried hard not to give anything away, yet I felt myself surrendering to the charged energy of the moment. After pulling on the shorts, he didn't get back into bed. Instead, he walked over to that lone chair in the corner, sat down, stretched out his long legs, and just stared at me. Being observed so intently, so openly in the darkness, it was both unnerving and sparked something inexplicable deep inside. I kept my eyes shut, feigning sleep, but how long could I really keep up this charade? Finally, the tension became unbearable. Taking a breath, I stirred, slowly sitting up in bed, letting the sheet pull around my waist, making sure my thin nightgown strap slipped slightly off one shoulder. When my eyes met Liam's across the dimly lit room, I let my voice quaver just a little. "Liam?" I whispered into the silence. "You're watching me." The words hung there, heavy-loaded. The game, whatever it was over. And I knew, with chilling certainty, nothing would ever be the same again. Liam's eyes widened for a fraction of a second. Then he took a deep, audible breath before speaking. His voice was low, but steady, carrying a new weight. "I don't know, Claire," he admitted, not looking away. "We've been living under the same roof for a while now, especially since Dad's been away so much. And the more time we spend together, the more I feel." He trailed off, then met my gaze squarely. "You might not realize it, but sometimes it's hard to hide how much I admire you. Being stuck here like this, it feels like some kind of weird dream." His words caught me off guard, the raw honesty of them, but they also ignited that dangerous spark inside me into a flame. Liam wasn't looking away now. His eyes held mine with an intensity, a sincerity that left me completely captivated. "I need to get up early," he went on, his voice sounding like he was trying to convince himself more than me. "Get the car fixed." But his eyes didn't waver, not even slightly. "But right now, I just can't take my eyes off you, Claire. I've never felt this way about anyone before." My heart was racing, a wild drumbeat against my ribs. In that moment, fueled by a recklessness I didn't recognize, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed again. I walked the few steps across the worn carpet and sank down onto the floor directly in front of his chair, forcing him to look down at me. My eyes locked onto his. The energy crackling between us was so potent it felt physical, rendering words almost unnecessary. We sat there in charged silence for a long moment before I tilted my head, letting my lips curve into a small, challenging smile. "Ethan," I murmured softly, my voice holding both curiosity and daring, "are we talking about the same thing here?" Liam's stare intensified, darkened, as if he wanted to live this moment through pure feeling, beyond clumsy words. He didn't reply verbally, but the raw emotion naked in his eyes, desire, confusion, longing told me everything. And that's when I knew with absolute certainty. There was no turning back for either of us. As I looked into his eyes, a wave of boldness, almost overwhelming, surged through me. The mixture of doubt and undeniable excitement reflected there only pushed me further. Taking another deep breath, I spoke again, my voice quiet but forceful. "Liam," I whispered, capturing his complete attention. "When I came back into the room earlier, you were asleep. Your robe was open, and I couldn't take my eyes off you either. It stirred something, more than I thought possible." I paused, letting the admission hang heavy between us. "We can't run from these feelings, can we? We both know that." As my words settled in the charged air, I took a deliberate step back and slowly began to stand up. His gaze followed my every movement, his breathing quickening noticeably. I couldn't hold back the wave of exhilaration, of dangerous power rushing through me. My fingers found the ribbon tie at the neckline of my simple nightgown. As I carefully, slowly undid it, I could hear the sharp intake of his breath. "I guess," I murmured, my voice dropping to a husky whisper, the sound foreign even to my own ears. "We need to level the playing field, Liam. I slid the thin straps off my shoulders, letting the fabric slither down my body to pool at my feet on the cheap motel carpet. The cool, stale air brushed against my bare skin, only making the burning heat inside me flare hotter. The expression that crossed his face said it all: shock, adoration, and a magnetic pull he couldn't, or wouldn't, resist. The silence between us now felt like a tangible connection, our breaths seeming to mingle across the small space. Without breaking eye contact, I took another slow step toward him. "Now," I continued, my voice barely audible, "we'll see if we're really talking about the same thing." Liam's eyes remained locked on mine, his emotions raw, intense, almost furious in their strength. Suddenly, he surged up from the chair, his focus never wavering from me for an instant. He strode over and flicked on the main room light, flooding the dingy space with harsh, revealing illumination. Then he turned and firmly locked the door. My heart hammered against my ribs. In that moment, it felt like the entire world outside had ceased to exist, leaving just the two of us in that charged, overlit room. When he took a deliberate stride back toward me, my breathing hitched. He seemed to be trying to read my expression, searching my eyes, even though he already knew the answer to the unspoken question hanging between us. As he moved closer, his hands reached out, finding my waist. The warmth of his touch felt like an electric current, jolting through me, erasing any lingering doubt. Without uttering a word, he leaned forward, his intense gaze dropping to my lips. I didn't object. I couldn't. Everything about this moment, however wrong, felt terrifyingly right, inevitable, like a culmination of all the unspoken tension, the loneliness, the longing. When his lips finally met mine, all the tension that had been coiling inside me for hours, maybe even months, seemed to melt away, replaced by a firestorm. His kiss was tentative for only a split second, exploratory, before deepening with an intensity that stole my breath. It conveyed an urgent, undeniable need that mirrored my own. My hands involuntarily found his shoulders, gripping him, feeling the solid strength beneath his t-shirt, pulling him closer, the heat of his skin radiating through the thin fabric. The distance between us dissolved entirely as our breaths combined, our bodies pressed together. That single kiss felt like an eruption, a violent release of all the unspoken feelings, the hidden desires, the loneliness that had simmered between us. His youthful freshness and surprising vigor met the years of pent-up passion I hadn't even realized I still possessed. It was the start of something, a beginning both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, in that cheap motel room, there was no hiding, no pretending, no denying what we felt for one another anymore. Later, much later, I let myself fall back against the pillows, my body humming with an exhaustion that felt strangely satisfying, my thoughts racing even as my limbs felt heavy. My breathing was still unsteady. My bare foot brushed against the discarded fabric of my nightgown lying tangled on the floor. I felt Liam's eyes on me, his gaze steady now, a calm intensity flowing from him. After a minute, he leaned down and gently scooped up the garment. His fingertips brushed delicately against the spot where my foot had been, and even that simple, almost accidental touch sent fresh flames licking through me. He held the flimsy piece of fabric for a second, and I thought I saw a flash of hesitation, maybe regret, flicker across his face. But it was swiftly replaced by a look of quiet resolve. He tossed the nightgown onto the chair and then, slowly, his movements meticulous, deliberate, he crawled back onto the mattress beside me. As he moved closer, the expression on his face was a raw reflection of his feelings, equal parts lingering eagerness and an almost overwhelming, magnetic desire. As I lay there, feeling his proximity, my heart refused to settle. My breathing quickened again. Watching him lean towards me, I knew the space between us, physical and metaphorical, had evaporated completely. It felt as if everything had reached a critical point, a precipice. There was no going back. What I felt inside me in that moment was tremendous. It ached with guilt, yet it sang with a pleasure so intense it was almost painful. I looked up at the stained ceiling tiles, seeing Liam's face hovering in my peripheral vision. I was captivated by the simple, human gesture as he wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. I could read his experience in his eyes, flushed, thrilled, overwhelmingly satisfied, yet maybe a little stunned too. He'd given everything with an untamed enthusiasm that both thrilled and slightly scared me. I found myself strangely glad the car had broken down. "I'll never forget this hotel, Claire," Liam muttered finally, his voice thick, husky, each word seeming to require effort. His eyes were riveted on me again, but I noticed his hands were trembling slightly where they rested on the sheet. His body was taut, muscles still tight, yet his movements now held a new tenderness, as if he wanted to commit every detail to memory. And I'm definitely not letting my father sell that car anymore, he added, a ghost of his usual grin returning. After those words, he let himself collapse fully beside me, closing his eyes, his breathing gradually slowing. I was utterly spent, lacking even the strength to form a word. My legs felt shaky, disconnected. I didn't even realize when sleep finally pulled me under. The next morning felt jarringly bright, unnervingly normal. Liam returned from somewhere, presumably dealing with the mechanic, dangling the car keys. "She's fixed," he announced, his tone carefully neutral, his eyes darting towards me then quickly away. "Ready to, finish the drive? Go get David from the conference center." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me: dread, guilt, confusion, sadness. But tangled inextricably with it all was that persistent, dangerous thread of exhilaration. Looking at Liam now, the memory of the night before vivid and electrifying, the way he moved, the charged intensity when our eyes accidentally met, everything felt irrevocably different. Complicated. This journey wasn't just about trying to reconnect with my distant husband anymore. It felt like the first step onto a completely unknown, possibly treacherous path. What would happen when we stood face to face with David? Could we possibly pretend that last night, in room 107, never happened? One thing I knew for sure. This trip, the one I dreaded, had become the moment everything changed. So, what do you think? Has Claire crossed a line she can never uncross, or did she stumble into something that might actually save her in a twisted way? What happens when they reach David? I'm dying to know your theories. Drop them in the comments below. And if you're hooked on Claire and Liam's story, please smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss the explosive next chapter.